Welcome to the NeuroHeir Podcast, the show for cycle breakers, parents, young adults, and helping professionals ready to understand their nervous system through a generational lens, heal what isn't theirs to carry, and consciously choose what comes next. Hi, I'm your host, Leanna Hunt, an associate clinical mental health counselor and certified performance coach. Each week, you'll get stories, science, and somatic practices, plus my signature 4N framework: notice, name, nurture, and navigate, to help you honor resilience, break silence, and build deeper connection with yourself and those you love, all while shaping a legacy of safety, freedom, and possibility. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the NeuroHeir Podcast. Today, we're beginning a 4-episode series built around the 4 N's: notice, name, nurture, and navigate. And we're starting exactly where all nervous system work actually begins, with notice. Last episode, we talked about the window of tolerance, the idea that each of us has a zone where we can feel, think, connect, and I like to say thrive. And that's when stress pushes us too far, too fast, or for too long, that we move outside of that window. And our nervous system goes to either a higher state, too high, or too low. And so today's episode isn't about going into that model all over again, but it is about learning how to listen to your body sooner before you're fully outside of the window. Because your window of tolerance isn't just this concept or this PDF on a piece of paper. It's not something you're just either in or out of. The window is a relationship. And like all relationships, it deepens through our attention, our presence, and our listening. Last episode, we talked about the upper and lower borders of your window of tolerance as you were able to look at a window in your own home. And your window has a frame, right? That's what holds it into the wall. So to go a little bit deeper today, the upper and lower frame of your window are not hyperarousal or complete shutdown yet. They're what I like to call the frames of dysregulation. So above the frame is the full nervous system state of hyperarousal. That's where we see that panic attack. We might see road rage, intense feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, panic. All of those things are there. And below the frame is the full nervous system state of hypoarousal, which is that complete collapse or shutdown. But what is right at the window frame? That's where the earliest somatic signals live. And that's where we're going to start today. Maybe you notice it as just a subtle tightening in your body when you are starting to leave your window of tolerance. Maybe for you, it's a slight speeding up of your heart rate or your breath. Or maybe your system is telling you that you have to pull inward and withdraw. Or maybe it feels like an intense sense of pressure. And here's why this matters so much. The sooner we start to notice those signals, the sooner we can actually stay in relationship with ourselves. That relationship with our own body is what allows us to stay in relationships with others. And this is where co-regulation actually becomes possible. Because co-regulation doesn't start with another person calming you down. It actually starts with you knowing what's happening inside you. If I don't know what my body is doing, if I can't feel the edge of my own window of tolerance, I can't ask for support, I can't slow myself down, and I can't communicate my needs. Notice is what creates choice. I've been spending more time in my own noticing practice lately, which has been pretty cool. And when I do this, I'm really allowing whatever shows up to be there. There isn't always a story attached. There isn't always a memory. Sometimes there is, but not always. But recently, I asked myself to recall a time when I started to feel dysregulated. Not fully out of my window, just a time that my body started to feel off. And what I noticed was this intense tightening in my throat, a sensation that I don't think I've really focused on before, or at least not in a long time. And I have done a lot of body work, at least since, probably 2017. But for several minutes, all I did was sit with it. Even though I wanted to, I didn't allow myself to try to analyze it. I didn't tell it had to leave. I just noticed the sensation, and I invited myself to get really curious. And on its own, after several minutes, the area around my throat just started to soften up. I didn't use any other intentional technique other than just gentle belly breathing in and out of my nose and just noticing. The sensation moved through me and I was able to shift my attention and then move on with my day. What I found super interesting though was that the rest of the day, my body felt really exhausted and I was more emotional than usual. But again, I didn't try to change anything. I let it move through me more like a wave than a brick wall. That experience taught me something really important. My body didn't need fixing, but guess what it needed? It did need my permission. In a sense, I got to become my own witness to the sensation. One of my favorite quotes comes from Peter Levine, who says, "Trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside you in the absence of an empathetic witness." That line has stayed with me for a really long time since I first heard it. And lately I've been sitting with this question. What if our noticing practices allow us to become our own empathetic witness? Not just for our present day sensations, but even for the younger parts of us that never had one. There's research that helps explain why this matters. In interpersonal neurobiology, attention is understood as a core mechanism of integration. Where we place our attention shapes how the nervous system organizes itself, which I think is pretty interesting. So when we notice sensation with curiosity, without urgency or judgment, we're not doing nothing. We're actually inviting integration. And here's something we don't talk about enough. Notice isn't just only for moments when we're leaving the window. We also need to intentionally notice when we're inside it. Why? Because noticing regulation reminds the nervous system what connection feels like. It helps us recognize when repair is possible. And it also builds trust with ourselves, with others, and the world we live in. So I want you to pause for a moment and just ask yourself, when I'm in my window of tolerance, what do I notice in my body? Maybe you notice first a grounding sensation in your feet, or maybe it's breath that moves without effort through your chest or your heart center. Maybe overall you just feel lighter, or your body feels more open, or maybe it's this genuine, beautiful desire to be close to someone that you love. These are some of the most common ways my clients describe it. Regulation has sensation too, which is important, and learning to recognize that matters just as much as noticing the symptoms of dysregulation. Here are a few questions you can sit with to deepen your noticing practice inside the window. As always, they'll also be in the show notes for you to return to at any time. So the first one, I know my body feels grounded because, and fill in the blank. When I feel calm, there is a settling sensation in my, and fill that in. When I feel more regulated, my thoughts tend to, and the last one, when I'm in my own window of tolerance, connection feels like. These questions are about becoming more familiar with your system when it feels safe. This awareness becomes especially important once we move outside those window frames, because that's where people often get frustrated with themselves. Many people tell me, I know the tools, I just can't access them when I'm activated. And remember, there's a reason for that. As I mentioned last week, when we move outside our window, the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain responsible for reasoning, planning, and perspective, it actually goes offline. And at the same time, the brain's threat detecting systems take over. So of course, coping skills don't work then, because logically your brain is not giving you a list of coping skills. You can't actually just think your way out of a state that isn't being run by thinking. This is why notice comes first. Notice is what gently brings the thinking brain back online without trying to force a state of calm and also without bypassing the body. Something else that's really important to remember. Safety does not come from trying to control regulation or trying to control our coping skills or our techniques or controlling our body to stay in the window of tolerance. Safety, that felt sense of safety, actually comes from attunement. What is attunement? Attunement actually means accurate, compassionate presence. Research in affect regulation and attachment shows that nervous systems learn regulation through being felt and not corrected. So over time, those experiences become internalized. So when we practice noticing our own sensations with curiosity instead of judgment, we're actually getting to offer our nervous system the same thing it once needed from somebody else. And remember, attunement doesn't require calming, but it does require staying. And that's why noticing alone can sometimes be enough to shift a state. Often, when we leave our window of tolerance, it's not all of us. It's just a part of us that's stepping forward. Most often, it's what is called a protective part, one that learned that at some point that this response was necessary in order to survive. And here's a reframe from my somatic trainer, Britt, that has really, really helped me. What if this isn't dysregulation at all, but the only form of self-regulation your system had access to at the time? I want you to sit with that for a moment. What if the very state that you are trying to heal right now, such as hypervigilance, complete shutdown, people-pleasing, staying busy or staying small, what if the very state that you're trying to heal right now was once the smartest way that your nervous system knew how to keep you safe? Remember that these initial patterns did not come from weakness. They came from the intelligence inside you designed to protect you at all costs. Your brain learned to assess your environments and then adapt. The challenge isn't that those strategies were wrong. It's that the nervous system doesn't automatically update just because your life changes. So these responses keep showing up, not because something's wrong with you or because you're broken, but because your system hasn't yet received enough information that something new is possible now. And again, that's why noticing is so important, because we ask a part of us to do something differently. And before we can do that, we have to understand why it learned to do this in the first place. I want to share a hypothetical client example with you. She's a composite of so many women that I've worked with, and we're going to call her Sarah. Sarah came into our work together feeling really frustrated and exhausted all the time. She described herself as constantly on edge, always scanning for what might go wrong, and completely feeling depleted by the end of the day. And she told me all the tools she's tried. She'd gone to breath work, she'd done grounding exercises, she had affirmations written all over her house and on her phone. And she said she had done a lot of mindset work, but she also kept saying the same thing. I know what I should do, but my body just won't cooperate. So when we started to slow it down and start with notice, something powerful shifted. And remember, if there's a secret to any of this noticing, sometimes we actually have to slow down in order for the nervous system work to speed up. So again, we have to slow it down for that healing to be able to escalate. So what Sarah started noticing was that she started seeing her system would speed up. She noticed that her chest tightened whenever she felt uncertain, and that her thoughts raced when she didn't have a clear plan. That stillness to her actually felt like danger. And at one point, she said something that finally made sense. If I slow down, something bad will happen. That was the moment that everything started to shift for Sarah. As she stayed curious without trying to fix anything, she began to learn and realize that this hyper alert state had actually once kept her safe. Growing up, she had learned that being prepared, aware, and emotionally contained was actually how she avoided conflict in her family. It was like this massive aha moment for her that her nervous system actually was not malfunctioning. It was doing exactly what it had learned to do. Instead of fighting the anxiety, Sarah began to thank the part of her that had kept her going for so long. And from there, the work wasn't about shutting the response down. It was about helping her body learn that constant vigilance was no longer required for safety and connection. Over time, she began to notice the edge of her window sooner. She learned to pause before spiraling. She asked for support instead of pushing through. And she finally started to rest without guilt. Not because she forced herself to, but because her system finally felt safe enough to try something new. And I'm wondering, as you think about Sarah, what points that I shared about Sarah resonate with you? And just invite yourself to think about, what is that story that you've lived through that has prevented you from spending more time in this window of connection, of thriving, of complete, beautiful fulfillment in your life. This brings us into another layer of notice, one that looks not just at us, but also where we came from. It's that generational piece. I want to invite you gently to explore some of these questions within yourself and your family. What stress responses feel familiar or inherited to you? What ways of coping did you learn just by watching and observing your family? And what feels uniquely yours that's maybe not like anybody else? You also might ask, what did regulation look like in your family? What responses helped your nervous system survive then? And what might those parts of you need now? And as always, with any questions, my invitation is the same, to start to explore these with curiosity. And if it feels okay for you, I just want to take a moment right here with you. I want you just to ask yourself, am I inside my window? Am I near the edge, or am I completely outside it? What sensations in my body tell me that? And whatever you're noticing right now, does this feel familiar to you? And remember, you're not trying to change anything today, just to notice. Remember, as we already said, the step of notice is not about control, but it is about relationship. And those relationships that you care most about, in order for them to deepen, for you to have more genuine, beautiful connection, it is about noticing what your relationship is like with yourself first. And remember, regulation is never something that is going to be perfect. That isn't even a thing. But I do want to invite you to start noticing what signals your body is offering you through your own lens of curiosity. Because your unique window of tolerance, all of that happens not through force, but through listening. And that listening starts with you listening to you. Okay, guys, so next episode, we're going to move into the second N, name. We'll talk about how identifying which part is activated can help restore safety faster than a lot of other tools. Until then, remember, stay gentle with yourself. Your nervous system has been working so hard to protect you. Just want to thank you guys for being here. Remember, anything you want from today's episode, like the questions, those ponderings, and any of the research, can always be found in the show notes. And also, if you missed it last week, make sure you head to the show notes to download the NeuroHeir Survival Guide. It's a pretty intense, I think about 20-page guide for you to start exploring more about your own window of tolerance states. Until next time, bye guys.